by most accounts, yesterday's meeting between President Trump and President Vladimir Zelensky, as well as many of the major leaders in the European Union, as well as Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, this meeting was a very positive one. Everybody seems to be very hopeful, at least outwardly. And I would say the reports coming from pretty much everybody, you can sort of say Schultz in Germany is a little bit more of a naysayer. But for the most part, I mean, you've even got Emmanuel Macron sounding like he's in a good mood after all of this. And he rarely has any reason to be in a good mood these days. But everybody seems to be in good spirits, and there's a lot of hope that a near future trilateral meeting between President Trump, President Vladimir Putin, and President Zelensky will result in a peace, a lasting peace. Now, there are three things that must happen, three things that need to be established for this peace deal to work. Number one, of course, is the security guarantee of some sort. President Trump has made it very clear. Ukraine will not be part of NATO. And to be fair, Joe Biden even told Ukraine before the invasion that Ukraine would not be part of NATO. Okay? NATO's been saying that for a long time. Of course, things have changed a little bit, but I would argue, and I've argued in the past, that had they just completely taken that possibility off the board, there's a good chance, not 100%, but there's a good chance that Russia might not have invaded at all. The potential for Ukraine to join NATO was one of the catalysts for the invasion. Not the only one, but one of the catalysts. Number two, it really comes down to the money aspect of it, right? And this is where President Trump is going to come in and play a major role. Right now, the spigot has been dropped to a trickle. You've got, I mean, you still got Canada sending over money, but for the most part, a lot of these nations are drained. The United States is withholding. They're selling weapons instead of giving them. They're trying to limit aid to the minimum possible for Ukraine, military aid. And so this black hole of corruption that Vladimir Zelensky controls, at least in part, at least outwardly controls, this is one of the most corrupt nations in the world, and aid that goes into it is barely siphoned through and given out to places that actually need it. The rest of it is used to help the oligarchs, help the people, and basically launder money for the world. And but with aid dropping down to a trickle compared to the massive amounts that was being sent to Ukraine, the question now becomes, okay, well, is it time? Have we squeezed all the juice out of that particular fruit? Is it time to switch to recovery mode, which is a whole new round of more aid, more money, worldwide fundraisers, BlackRock getting involved, and of course, with BlackRock involved, that means the World Economic Forum is involved with Larry Fink. That's a discussion for another day. But yeah, so if that transition can be made, and again, this is where President Trump will be able to talk dollars and cents and get into promises and obligations and all that stuff. Well, I could see that it would behoove Ukraine to say, okay, we made our money off the war, now we got to make money off the peace. And it looks like we're going to make more money off peace than war, so time to switch over. That, again, I think is very minor. We'll see how that goes. The big question mark, the part that keeps, the only thing that I believe could prevent a peace deal from happening very soon is Donetsk. This is the region in Ukraine that Russia wants. I mean, Russia wants this. This is the nut that they have not been able to crack. As a matter of fact, let's go to a story. I didn't have it ready. Let me pull it up real quick. Gosh, this is a story I read earlier today. Here it is. Okay. This is from Ronnie Reyes over at New York Post. Putin's biggest demand involves Ukraine surrendering Donetsk, its most fortified region. This is the nut that Russia has not been able to crack. They've been able to get a good chunk of the land that they want, but not this particular one. And it is the most important, not just because it has three major cities, approximately 4 million people in the entire region, not just because it has minerals, but because this is considered the gateway through which Europe could be invaded, or vice versa. Whoever controls that, it's almost like controlling a canal. Okay, that is the fortified region that prevents Russia from advancing further into Ukraine and eventually into Europe, and vice versa. If NATO wanted to advance upon Russia, this is the staging ground upon which they would do so. If they have control over it, and Russia wants control, Ukraine wants to keep control, and currently they do have control. And I'll explain where the real decision-making should come into play here in a second, but let's go into the article first. Ukraine's most heavily fortified region has become the center point for peace talks to end the war, with Russian leader Vladimir Putin reportedly demanding that Kyiv cede the entire territory to Moscow. But the Donetsk oblast, which is smaller than Massachusetts and home to about 4 million people, has been at the center of some of the most brutal fighting of the war, and the Kremlin has not been able to take the entire region for more than 3.5 years. A source familiar with Friday's meeting between Putin and President Trump described negotiations over the fate of Donetsk as the ball game. This is the part this will make or break it, okay? And this is where President Trump's skills will be truly tested. Everything up to this point, setting up the meetings, talking to Putin, talking to Zelensky, talking to European leaders, bypassing a ceasefire, calling for peace. These are all great moves, okay? Big time moves, major moves for President Trump, something that his predecessor was not able to do at all, something that the vast majority of world leaders would not have been able to do even if they had the power that President Trump wields, which of course is vast. But the real question, the ball game, is whether or not he can get over this particular sticking point, because neither side seems willing to bend, let alone to break on the issue. According to the source that talked to the Post, every issue is an ancillary issue except for Donetsk. Ukrainian officials and Western observers say giving up the territory without a fight should be a non-starter. I disagree, but I'll explain why here in a second. George Barros, the Russian team head for the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War think tank, said conceding the land would be playing right into Putin's hands and leave Ukraine susceptible for a future assault. He called such a move a foolish proposition. It would not be a foolish proposition if, in exchange for this land, and you can see it if you're looking on the screen, you can see it's this red portion of the map that's currently controlled by Ukraine. This is the part that Russia wants. This is the part that they have not been able to break. You can see these. Can I zoom in? Let me try to zoom in on that a little bit. No, it won't let me zoom in. Okay. You can see those three cities there. Stoyansk, Kramatorsk, and Dushkivka. I think I butchered that one. Dushkivka. Yeah, I think I got it. Those are heavily populated cities, and they also, that area, that region is a whole lot of military, a whole lot of fortification, and Russia has not been able to take it after all this time. 3.5 years, still haven't been able to break through. So that's why they're saying, okay, we'll get peace, but we want that. Ukraine's saying, we want peace, but we're not giving it. But I think they should, and I'll explain here in a second. It would not be a foolish proposition, though, as a lot of people are saying, because the only way that could ever be traded away, so to speak, is if Ukraine had rock-solid security guarantees, preferably from Europe, the European Union, possibly from NATO, and it's a non-starter if it's from the United States. I can tell you that right now. President Trump does not want to put troops in the area, let alone in that anywhere near that potential hotspot. We need to be able to give them security guarantees of some sort, just not us. It's Europe's problem. Let Europe handle it. They should. They should handle this. And if that does have to include NATO, as long as U.S. troops are involved, look, I don't like it because that puts us closer to an obligation. But then again, most of the nations that could get involved in Europe are already a part of NATO anyway. So it's not like whether it's under the flag of NATO or under the flag of France or whoever, it's still an attack by Russia on them would result in our unfortunate involvement. But look, we'll get around that, I'm hoping. But let's continue with the article first. Russia has been desperate for full control of the coal and mineral-rich Donetsk border region since Moscow backed a rebellion by Moscow-friendly leaders on the oblast in 2014. The Kremlin's troops currently occupy about 70% of Donetsk. They want the whole thing. Russian control of the contested region includes Luhansk, where that control is more complete. Moscow had previously recognized the regions as Donetsk and Luhansk's People's Republic before launching the 2022 invasion. And this is why I think Russia is in the right on this one. If you look at the area, the people, there are 3 reasons why it should be part of Russia. And again, I'm not going to dive into geopolitics of this. I'm not going to get into a moral debate over where they should be. I don't know the region. I don't know the people. All I can go by are the stats and the various reports from what I'm hearing. And from what I'm reading, and this has been for a long time, by the way. I remember had a friend, a personal friend, reach out to me, not somebody that I even realized was politically involved. He reached out to me just out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in a while. This is back shortly after the invasion. He's like, look, the area they're going after, the land they go after, they want to be part of Russia. And over the last 3.5 years, I've learned this may actually be the case. They're heavily populated with Russian speakers, number one, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I mean, it means something, but that doesn't necessarily mean choice. It's just what they speak. You wouldn't call well, anyway, I was going to get into an analogy that probably wouldn't have worked very well. But they do. They are very much heavily Russian speakers, and a good chunk of them want to be part of Russia. They consider themselves Russian. They do. They celebrate with Russians. They feel as if, because of their heritage, their history, as part of the Soviet Union, that they are still Russian. And so the people, I don't know if that's 30%, 50%, 80%, I don't know. But a very good chunk of the people in that region would like to be part of Russia. The biggest reason, though, for a lot of them isn't just history or just because they speak Russian. A lot of it is because the people have felt and expressed this feeling that even before the invasion, they felt that they were being not just neglected by Kyiv, but also in many ways attacked by the Ukrainians because of their heritage, because of their traditions and their Russian-speaking nature. They felt like outcasts already, and they wanted to be part of Russia. Again, not speaking as a geopolitical expert, speaking as somebody who is reading reports, trying to be as unbiased as possible from both sides. But I would say the preponderance of evidence rests in the hands of Russia. Vladimir Putin has a point. He says these people want to be Russian, and if a deal is made, then I'm certain they will allow people on both sides to be able to move, right? You're in Donetsk. You don't want to be part of Russia. We'll help you. We'll help you move deeper into Ukraine. Great. Or hey, you rooting for Russia? You're in Ukraine. Here's an invitation. Move over here. Obviously, that's not going to be 100%, but a good chunk of people would move as a result, I believe. And I think that's what should happen. Ironclad, very, very well organized and well agreed upon non-NATO security agreements with Ukraine, made by member nations, members of the European Union, and maybe even others. Hey, Canada wants to get involved. They can send all the troops they want. Great. Send them over. In exchange, Russia gets the land that it wants, the land that the people in the area want to be Russian. Okay, make that happen. Then, of course, there's the deal part, the sealing of the deal, which will be President Trump coming in and explaining, here's who we're going to get involved, here's how much they're going to pay, here's how we're going to rebuild Ukraine and help the Ukrainian people. And then unfortunately, it'll turn even deeper into corruption. It'll become more of the world's money laundering black hole. But at least there won't be as many people being killed. There won't be as much fighting. Not nearly as much. So that's how I hope it goes down. I don't know if it will go down like that, but I do think that based upon everything we've seen, based upon everything we're hearing coming out of these meetings, that if and when there is a trilateral meeting between the three presidents, they are able to come to an agreement, and we may finally, praise God, have peace in Ukraine.